Well, now, we're come to our final segment of the day, and I'm delighted now I'm going to be joined once again by ITIC Chair Ruth Andrews, by Fáilte Ireland's Jenny de Saulles, and Tourism Ireland's Niall Gibbons, who, as you know, whose colourful collection of colourful ties are now firmly back in business. So let's have all three of you up beside me here. And you will have, we're going to have about a 10-minute Q&A session, so you'll be able to direct questions to the panel again, so don't be shy when the time comes around. Maybe have a look at your lanyard and see what your name is, just check beforehand, but we will be doing some questions, so don't be afraid of that. Let's start with you, Ruth Andrews. When you hand over the chains of office to Elena Fitzgerald in June, after 2 years as chair, are you running out the door not looking back? Or what a time to have been chair?
What a time indeed to have been chair, and so good was it that I extended by an extra year. So I probably am one of the first chairs to have served three consecutive years. But you know, and rightly so in the crisis that we found ourselves in. At least I had 1 year in 2019, or almost, of what was kind of regular in terms of a tourism.
It went from record.
It certainly did. But look, I suppose we've been through crises before, and none were similar to COVID in terms of them being so existential. And certainly when I look back on it, I suppose I look back on it from a point of view of never realising that you could be so busy when so many businesses were in crisis. I've never worked so hard. And I know lots of people with their businesses closed were in exactly that similar position. But I think we look back on this like we do with all crises in tourism and travel. I think we'll look back and we'll look at what we learned from it. There's always learnings from these crises, and I have the privilege of speaking to so many businesses on a weekly and a daily basis. And now that we're coming out of the other side and we're starting that road and that transition to recovery, you know, people are taking what they learned through very difficult times, and through times where you literally had to think on your feet, because we never knew from month to month, week to week, am I opening my business? How much of my business am I opening? So people really had to look at their businesses in a very different way, and there have been some really interesting learnings from that. And I think that's certainly going to help us during this transition and recovery period to rethink tourism and to rethink how we want Irish tourism to be for the next generation. And particularly, I suppose, the theme of today is sustainability. And it's something, and the reason that we're really focusing in on that is we need to bolt that in now in terms of the decisions we're making about the recovery of Irish tourism, and who our next audience and who our returning audiences are going to be, and how that's really going to matter. And Ireland owns the colour green. We really do have a unique opportunity. And it's been fantastic to listen to all of our speakers this morning, you know, from Colin to Willie to Lynn, etc., talking about sustainability in a really meaningful way, and I think
in a very positive way.
Very positive way, and I think it really serves to embed it now, and it's incumbent on us all to take it seriously and to work together. The one thing we've really learned, I think, out of the last crisis was the benefit of collaboration, and this industry has never worked so closely together, and it has really paid off. And I hope, I suppose, you know, the baton that I'll pass on to Elena and the board of ITIC is that is something that we really need to hold on to. And I think the Minister even referred to it herself this morning. I think it's probably one of the things that she learned very quickly when she took up her role as Minister right in the middle of a crisis.
Get started.
That it was all about collaboration, and she learned to trust the industry. And she learned to understand that collaboration was critical in order for her to be able to go to the cabinet table.
And Jenny, what are you taking away from this period? Like, what have been kind of the big learnings or lessons? Because a bit like Ruth, it's been a frantic period of activity.
Mm-hmm. It has, but I suppose, like Ruth said, you know, the industry has showed not only its resilience but its innovation. And I suppose that's the thing. When I look forward, I think it's a really positive time. You know, there's been a lot of innovation, you know, around digital, around the customer service that's all been brought forward. And if we look at, I mean, we talked a lot about this morning about the labour challenges, but actually, you know, I'd like to think a little bit about the positive things that are happening within the industry. So, you know, we've all changed a bit coming out of COVID, and there's a lot of people are looking for better work-life balance. You know, we talked about this wellness. So a lot of people are looking to work less hours, and, you know, tourism as an industry gives more flexibility. Like we are 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, and there are a lot of people out there actually who want to work just weekends or they want to work evenings. Because
But that's hugely challenging for businesses trying to manage that in what we've heard throughout the day is a highly, highly competitive labour market.
Absolutely, but what's great is the industry are being really innovative about that now. We're seeing, for example, businesses attract back maybe working mums who were struggling to get back into the workforce, but they're now offering them hours from 9:30 to 2 so they can do the wrap off. They're also being very successful in attracting back retirees. So there's a lot of people who are retiring young, who are very fit, and they have a lot to give the industry, but they only want to work 2 or 3 days. And the industry is being really flexible about that. And I think the other thing that we're seeing, a lot of people who have joined the industry in the last 2 years have had phenomenal opportunities for promotion. So for me, I think, one of tourism is and continues to be a resilient and innovative sector, and there isn't a better time to join it.
Niall, we are still more than 2 metres apart, but the last time when we met in studio, it was a very, very different picture. Your ties are back. Where are we at now?
We're in a much better position than we were this time last year, no question about it. And it was interesting when people have been talking about learnings through the pandemic. I mean, I came into the industry after 9/11. I thought I'd seen it all. But at times of crisis, I think it's really important to focus on a small number of really big issues. So what did we do? We, first of all and foremost, listened to what our customers were saying and what they were thinking. And we're on our 10th wave of research now in the international marketplace. We'll release the results on that next week. And essentially where the customer's mindset now is moving on from COVID. People are now, there's a strong uptick in interest in taking a holiday in 2022 and beyond. People are now ranking the cost of living number 1, they're ranking Ukraine number 2 and COVID number 3. So we're now starting to emerge into a more normal space. The second thing that we said was that aviation and how people get here is critical, and our support for that sector was really important. I was on the Aviation Recovery Task Force. It delivered in a record time, about 4 weeks. But the incentive schemes that the government have put in place this year means that in July, just taking as an example, we'll have 93% of our air connectivity that we had back in 2019. And when you have that, you've got a real fighting chance of success. The third thing was keeping our industry connected with the international marketplace. And we put in place an IMAP program, an industry market access program, which we'll probably spend over $2 million on this year. But like, for example, we've got a sales mission out to the east coast of the States this week, which is covering New York, Boston, DC and Chicago. We're at the west coast of the States in May. We had 200 travel agents in conjunction with Fáilte Ireland down in Kerry earlier on this year. A really successful return to Mehel. So one of the destinations that was first out of the blocks, and that's going to be really important in the context of recovery.
Yeah. Obviously, you have got, as part of that, supports that the government gave us a huge marketing budget, and what are you going to do with that?
Well, what have we done with it is the question. We've been out of the blocks really early. We got our Green Button campaign, which was in the can like last year and waiting to go with a number of false starts. But that's been out. Just take the United States, for example. That market produced over 1.8 billion euros in 2019. But we're now out in 8 metropolitan districts on television, on NBC, ABC, CBS, Fox News, big channels with big reach in catchment areas where we've got direct air connectivity, working very closely with the carriers, working very closely with the trade, bigger than ever sales missions out now, best of Ireland out in the US at the moment. And just take, for example, now, traditional gateways like New York, Boston, Chicago have been served through the pandemic, but gateways like the likes of San Francisco is back from early May. Then we start to see Seattle, LA, Charlotte, Dallas coming back as well, and the carriers starting to talk about extending their season beyond where it was going to finish in September. So that's really positive. In Great Britain, we've been out, reaching a huge number of people on all mainstream channels like ITV, Channel 4. We're lead sponsors on Derry Girls this year, which has got a great reaction. Out in mainland Europe as well, again, out on major channels in Germany and France and across our European markets. We're opening an office in San Francisco next month. We're opening an operation in Switzerland and Austria. So a significant expansion, and it's getting us real good share of voice, and we'll be announcing results from our research next week. We've seen a significant uptick in people's awareness.
Give us a wee preview.
No, I don't have all the numbers in front of me, but what we are seeing is a significant uptick in people's awareness of Ireland as a destination vis-a-vis other competitors, which is really important. So share of voice well up, and remembering Ireland and recall for Ireland very, very strong.
Ruthie, top line figures are quite good, and that is brilliant. It is good to hear, whether it is in terms of, aviation, all of those things. But I suppose those problems that are going to persist, the labour and skill supply, is something that you're just hearing about all of the time.
Correct. And they're things that are not going to be solvable quickly. So it is going to take time, it's going to take determination, and again, it's going to take that collaborative approach. And the industry is up for it. Fáilte Ireland are working very closely with the industry. There's a number of working groups well established at this stage, looking at the shorter term as well as the longer term strategic change that has to happen, because there is going to be that need for a longer term.
And on that, obviously we heard from the Minister earlier and going to be canvassing, as she says, hopefully for a deferral of the 9% VAT rate amongst other supports. But those supports that we've heard consistently cannot last forever. And I'm just wondering, do you feel that the government and the industry are on the same page in respect of that? Because obviously there will be very differing views as to how those supports should be tapered, what should stay, what should go, and at what point you take the training wheels off.
Yeah, and look at a lot of the supports that were put in place, certainly to support tourism to get to recovery, have now come to an end, as they will be at the end of this month. What we will be looking.
Are you worried about that moment?
Yeah, look, for a lot of businesses, it is going to be a worry, but particularly when you see things like EWSS disappearing, whatever else. But for a lot of businesses, it's actually managed to keep the wheels on the machine, and it's certainly helped to maintain those critical jobs of very experienced people that if we had lost because of not having such a support, we will be in even deeper trouble. I think, what we have to make sure that government are aware of is we have started recovery. We have made it very clear in all of the ITIC reports that have been done since 2021 that we are on a road to recovery. It is not going to happen overnight. We are looking, as Owen shared this morning, of getting back to 29 figures, not till 2026.
You've pushed the time out to 26.
Exactly. And we're really, in terms of, it was challenging enough coming out of the back of a pandemic, and then look what happened to us in February and March. So we have even greater challenges in terms of the drag that there is on that recovery and the pace. I mean, it's encouraging. Our latest figures obviously show that we've moved from 60 to 67%. That will be phenomenal if we achieve that. And as Niall and all of our airline colleagues have said, who would ever have thought, 6 months ago, we'd have been talking about 90% of the air access capacity coming back on the transatlantic route. None of us would have thought
Jenny,
that.
obviously it does feel as if we've been sort of in a state of perma-crisis, but we've heard how important sustainability is, and the Minister mentioned earlier the carbon calculator. How are you helping SMEs to meet both the demands of being economically sustainable as well as environmentally sustainable?
So I suppose first, if we talk about the environmental sustainability, as a number of the speakers today talked about, it's really about helping businesses. What do they do? So, sometimes it can seem massive and there's so much to happen. So there's a number of businesses that have a long-term vision that, they want to be carbon neutral and they have a plan, and we're working with them. But for a lot of the smaller SME businesses out there, they just don't know where to start. So what we've done is we've created a suite of supports that are really practical. So things around helping with your food waste, helping with your water waste, helping with your energy, and they're practical supports that give you 1, 2 and 3 things to do in your business that will make an immediate effect. I think as well as that, then we're looking at the more longer term piece, so that's the carbon calculator. So that is at a business level where you will actually do the carbon calculator analysis, and what it will identify for the businesses, what they're doing well, and then a journey of how they can actually reduce that carbon calculator. So again, I suppose there's a lot of support out there. We're starting with real practical supports that will help business to do things today and make a difference today and to save money. And I suppose the other piece you talk about is the wider sustainability piece. And I think, that's something that within Fáilte, we have this model we talk about VICE, which is about, it's the visitor, it's the industry, it's the community, and it's the environment. And I suppose when we're looking at support of the businesses, we're talking about very much in terms of that. And that financial sustainability is really, really important. And so again, we have a whole suite of supports that are really about helping businesses now, as Ruth said, journey from that loss of the government supports through debt warehousing and how they manage all of that, accessing the various kinds of finance, etc., and things that are there. And I suppose just one other thing that it's worth highlighting, Ruth was talking there about how government are perceiving the need for ongoing support. One of the things that we're doing at the moment, we're doing a key piece of economic analysis, which is really measuring and benchmarking Ireland's input costs versus all of the other countries, because what's really important at a government level, they're very good at understanding our need for competitiveness. So instead of having emotional conversation, what we're going to do is have data, which is basically showing where Ireland is disadvantaged and where government needs to actually support.
So to really kind of dig into that, there are 2 roving mics, so please put your hand up for questions. But before I do, Niall, Willie Walsh says, no shame. You should have no shame if you get on a plane. But I suppose that if presumably we do go back to 2019 levels, there is a question about chasing volume, chasing growth, and the question of how can we marry economic and environmental sustainability. And I suppose it's a question I asked Lynn and Willie, but how are we going to reconcile those? Because obviously we're very anxious to have a very, very strong tourism industry, but one that is sustainable. Do you worry about how we're going to square that circle?
Yeah, look, I think we have to change our language. I think, and I had this during the last global financial crisis, everyone used to ask me, when will we get back to 2007? We're never going back there. And we shouldn't be talking about going back to 2019. The forecasts that we have from Oxford Economics suggest that by 2030, our revenue is going to be very, very strong, and it's going to pose major challenges for our industry that we just have to deal with. But they're good challenges and they're good conversations to have. Tourism Ireland will start in the next number of months now, consulting with the industry and working with the government as well, and Fáilte Ireland on the sustainability agenda as it relates to demand. Which markets will we target? It's really about revenue. It's not about volume. I think we need to have a deeper conversation about tourism as well in terms of supporting rural Ireland. These are really important debates. How do we work with the arts and culture sector? What David McWilliams was talking about in terms of innovation, creativity. We have engaged now in partnerships with the Irish Arts Centre in New York, with the London Irish Centre, with the Centre Culturel in Paris, to start changing and starting a dialogue about what it means to be Irish abroad. When we were in Washington, D.C. during St. Patrick's Week, we had the Taoiseach there at the Riverdance, which is their 25th anniversary show. Well, 27th, we missed 2 years, but the 25th anniversary. 1,000 paying customers that night in DC, over 10 nights, now touring 40 cities. So how do we get Irish arts and culture onto the global stage? Because that's the differentiator. People are looking for authenticity. We're not Disneyland, they don't want queues.
And I know you won't give me a scoop on your research, but are we perceived as both safe and green? And from, when tourists come here, how do they perceive us? Because increasingly the demand is going to come from consumers. You're going to be sense checking where you're going and whether they have a sustainability agenda.
Yeah, look, from a perception perspective abroad, the reputation of Ireland is really strong. We should never beat ourselves up. Actually, the perception of Ireland abroad is much stronger than it is at home. That's probably the biggest challenge that we have. We beat ourselves up far too much. So we're coming from a very, very good place. Our image in terms of sustainability is good. And I think what we need to do is put more concrete foundations on some of the things that were talked about this morning. And that debate will happen now and will evolve. But we are dealing with an industry that is set for strong growth in the years ahead. And I think what we have to do now is look at those segments of the market that are more likely to deliver in revenue terms rather than physical volume.
Than just volume alone. Okay, so I have a question here just at the back. There we just have the mic on, yeah.
Thank you, Dearbhail. The question is related to tourism education. But first of all, I just want to say thank you to you and all the team in ITIC for a wonderful conference in such a wonderful venue, and many of us hope to be back here for other reasons before the summer's out. So just Owen mentioned earlier on, obviously, the report by Fáilte Ireland, 40,000 vacancies, of which almost 10,000 are at senior level, and many of those people have left the industry and more than likely will not return, but they are key professionals with a lot of skills, expertise and knowledge, and it's going to take a long time to replace those people. But at the same time, for the past decade, we've had a crisis in tourism education where numbers of prospective students choosing tourism-related education, when I say tourism-related, it could be anything from event management, hotel management, culinary arts, tourism management. The numbers have been falling year in, year out. And to put that into context, just for September of 2021, this current academic year effectively, of the 84,500 CAO offers that were made for all programs on a national basis, 46,500 were at level 8 graduate degree level. Of those, only 460 were for tourism and hospitality management related programs. That's just over 1%. And most of those degrees are 4 years long. You won't see those graduates until 2024, and many of them leave the country and it takes them a while to come back into the domestic industry.
Ruth, there is a question there, obviously with a huge loss of institutional memory during the pandemic, but it's also colliding with perhaps the need to make sure that tourism, people in this room know it's an attractive business, it's an attractive choice for your career, for your personal life, but does that message also need to get through?
It certainly does, and thanks for the question. It's a very valid one, and you know, it's not just since the pandemic that we've seen that fall off in applications to the CAO for exactly those courses that are available for tourism. That was pre-COVID as well, and I think it's just exasperated because the mindset of people after the pandemic is very much towards that work-life balance, and they just don't see tourism and hospitality as providing that work-life balance. And we do have a job to do to persuade others, and it's going to have to start below our school leavers, if you like, because we have to get to the people who influence those students in making decisions when they're doing the CAO, and that for that particular reason, through the COG, the Careers Oversight Group. That group is specifically set up to look fundamentally at a shift that needs to happen across the industry, working with education and working with Fáilte Ireland. And one of, I suppose, the big successes out of that has been the transition year programme, because which has just literally come out of the traps this year, but it's going to take a number of years for that to bed down, for us to make sure that we are hitting all of the schools and the students, and actually providing, when we take kids in for transition year, we really have an opportunity to impress them about our business. But first of all, we have to actually encourage them to choose a local business that's in tourism and hospitality as somewhere they will come to do part of their transition year programme. And secondly, we now have a defined programme of how you can make that a really good experience for them, not just here's a tray, run around there and we'll show you, follow Jim as he lifts the glasses, etc. So you're absolutely right. I mean, and that's why I'm saying there is a fundamental, a longer-term strategic piece of work that we're going to have to do, and we're not going to be able to solve all of those problems overnight. It's going to take a concerted effort, and it is going to, again, it comes back to this piece. The industry have to step up with Fáilte Ireland and the relevant departments responsible for higher and further education. And I think there's a real opportunity there, working with all of the institutions that deliver those programmes, that education that we need delivered at a whole number of levels to encourage people back into our industry.
That's superb. Are there any
Sorry, can I just come in there? It's just worth mentioning as well that we're actually in market right at the moment with 5th and 6th years to understand the perception of tourism courses, because actually there's a huge issue there. Well, we've done a lot of work in the last number of years of the education providers working very closely with the industry and creating courses that are fit for purpose to have people coming out with the right skills. Actually, what we haven't done is really look at the third leg of the stool, which is making sure that that's appealing for students. So we're right in the market at the moment, talking to them and understanding why they're not choosing that. And I think the other piece that Ruth talked about, there's some amazing stuff. There's great employers out in the industry, but the narrative isn't there right now. And Niall talked about us changing narrative. We need to change the narrative about tourism. Everybody in this room needs to talk about what a great industry it is, how great our businesses are and what we're doing. And as part of that, Fáilte Ireland is launching an excellent employer programme. And the objective of that actually is really connecting with employees in the sector and making this a better place to work, but more importantly, having a platform that we can showcase how brilliant this industry is and the great employers out there and the great opportunities for employees. But it is, an opportunity for all of us to talk about that.
As I search for another hand in the room, Niall, can I just ask you, it would be remiss of me as a Newry girl, not a Derry girl, to ask you about this new visa waiver and the challenge that's going to bring, and the challenge of promoting my part of the world and the island of Ireland as a whole in terms of how that is going to impact. I know it was something that you were talking about recently as a topic of concern.
Yeah, so for people who may not be aware, the Nationalities and Borders Bill is going through the UK at the moment. It's passed all stages in the House of Commons and House of Lords. And what this will do is introduce a visa waiver requirement for the UK from about 2025, which will include Northern Ireland. And obviously that's of significant concern to us because having promoted the island of Ireland for 20 years, it means that non-Irish or British nationals, so for example, someone from North America or someone coming on a holiday from Europe who wants to come in and visit the island of Ireland, who visits via the Republic of Ireland, would need that, what's called an ETA, same as like an ESTA for America, to travel into Northern Ireland. And you can just imagine the complications that that will cause, given where we are. So this is part of the post-Brexit agenda. It's something I think that it's probably an unintended consequence, so to speak, and the consequences for Northern Ireland tourism are extremely worrying. Our colleagues were in the Northern Ireland Affairs Committee in Westminster a couple of weeks ago. So we've been on the case, we're very well aware of it, but it's just another example of an institutional barrier that will unhinge our business. And if anything, we should looking to reduce barriers, make it easier to get here, easier to get around, travel out of our cities and have a really wholesome experience. And Northern Ireland has experienced an amazing renaissance in tourism, it has to be said, in the last decade, and has a great future. But these are the types of things that trip that up.
Especially in Newry and Mourne. Now, I have another question here.
Thank you. Chris Austin from Clishta Hospitality. I'd like to echo the superb panel discussion here today and a great event this morning, so thank you to all of you, and thanks for your support to the industry. Previous question there on the 40,000 vacancies, 10,000 of those, according to a recent RTE article, are chefs and culinary. There's a huge critical issue coming now for this summer in terms of staffing kitchens across the hospitality sector. We were allowed to apply work permits last year. My understanding is the department are currently approving permits from the first week of December 2021, yet there are hundreds, if not thousands, of international chefs who are ready to come and work in Ireland. I suppose the question is, what more can we do as an industry, and how can we get the government to realise that this, in a month's time or 2 months' time, with the new influx of tourism coming into Ireland, we're not going to be able to feed them, and we need support.
Ruth, all aspects of government are under pressure as they rebuild and recover themselves, and not least the huge work that has been undertaken by many government departments to deal with the crisis in Ukraine and the receipt of refugees here. So sometimes it's not easy, just as easy as saying it's just kind of snap it, we need that done. Like when you look at passports, you look at everything else, they need time to rebuild and recover too.
They do, and we've been highlighting this to Leo Varadkar's department in particular since January, and it was very apparent that that issue was already there at that point. And to be fair to him, he did acknowledge at a meeting with Catherine Martin that they had an issue themselves in terms of resourcing. They needed to get in additional staff as quickly as they could to actually deal, because it's not just the tourism and hospitality industry, obviously, but it's also other industries creaking at the seams for people, such as construction, the health area as well. So they really have come under enormous pressure from so many directions. And we continue, and you'll have seen in the report that we launched this morning, that again we've called that out as something that absolutely needs to be addressed. We cannot wait 20 weeks for the processing of work permits. We need those, and we need to be fast-tracked. It's as simple as that. So we are continuously banging on about it. I don't think there's a week goes by where either we, the Confederation, on behalf of all of the sectors in tourism, let alone our colleagues and our membership through the Restaurants Association, the Hotels Federation, AVI, etc., it is constantly being asked of government to get to really addressing that issue. And it is similar to our own situation. It is a crisis of resource. And it really is terribly frustrating. And we will continue to bang on about it on a daily and weekly basis until we see an improvement.
It's worth just saying one of the things that we are doing through the COG, we had a meeting recently, and we are actually looking to see if we can get chefs put onto the essential list. What would that do? It would reduce processing time to 6 weeks. The implication would be salary would go from 30,000 to 32,000, but I think that's not an issue for anybody. but it is a challenge to case make. So how do you case make that a chef is as essential, for example, as doctors or whatever? So we're in the process, we're in discussions with DETI about how we pull that together, and we're working with all of the sectoral bodies, the Restaurants Association, the IHF, the vintners, and we're pulling a case together so that we can hopefully get them put onto the essential list as soon as possible.
Yeah. I suppose, though, isn't it such a difference that the challenges that we're talking about, in one sense, is a challenge of success rather than others. It's been absolutely fascinating to listen to you all. I'm going to let Jenny and Niall go. Ruth, I want you to stay here because it's almost all we have time for today, and I'm going to invite Ruth just to thank our sponsors, without whom today would not have been possible.
Well, absolutely, and there are a number of thank yous. Yes, thank you, guys. Absolutely. Our sponsors are obviously are key and core to making this event happen for us, and we are really grateful, not just for their sponsorship, but for the enormous amount of time and effort that they have put in to supporting ITIC and to supporting this event happening, and indeed the sustainability report coming to fruition. So I really want to thank, it was great to see Colin Hunt staying with us for the morning and being so open in conversation with you. But a big thank you also to Mary Mackin, who works very closely with the team in ITIC, to Sarah Dempsey as well, who sat on our sustainability working group, and to Kathy Bryce, who joined us this morning. So they really have, and they've given us a 3-year commitment, which I think is a very sustainable one in terms of ITIC going forward. So we really do appreciate that. But there's some other thank yous I'd just like to make as well to our other sponsors, Fáilte Ireland and Tourism Ireland. Both obviously are associate members of ITIC and very valued members in that respect. But again, they always step up to the plate. They're important colleagues to the tourism industry and to us in ITIC, and we really do appreciate the support that they have continued to give us. I also want to thank every one of our speakers. I'm not going to mention them all, but I really think it was a fantastic morning. A great mix of ideas and thought processes. I love David's use of poetry to get us all thinking in a very different way. In fact, it reminded me of Nick Mottram at the launch of your last ship that we all had the pleasure of being on. That little book of poetry was actually in the little goodie bag. So I'm going to go home and read my poetry book now that I know I have the same copy as David. Can I also thank our fantastic team in ITIC, who, again, they're a small but extremely efficient bunch, and they really pull it out of the bag every time. Needless to say, our CEO is just fabulous, and he is brilliant, and he delivers every time and has delivered so marvellously for the industry over the last number of years in particular. So we really do appreciate all that Owen does, supported by Arlene and Catherine, who really pulled off the project with great aplomb. And I know Dearbhail was very much hand in glove with yourself and dealing with our sponsors. So thank you guys for the great job that you've done. To you, the audience, for being with us, for supporting and really, I suppose, making what ITIC does all the more important. And it's your ideas, it's your situations that we embrace. We want to be the best voice we can for you. We hope that we have done that for you over the last couple of years, but it's important that we continue to do that. So know that you have a federation who works hard on your behalf, and who your representative bodies who form the Council of ITIC really do a sterling job for each and every one of your businesses. So without everybody coming to the table under that umbrella organisation of the Confederation, it would be very difficult for us to know exactly all of those sweet spots that we need to be hitting to represent you. Dearbhail, as always, Dearbhail, you do a fantastic job. It's been wonderful to have her back again this year. Thank you. And, we know you're an Uri girl, but look, we love Derry girls as much, and I'm sure there'll be something on Uri girls at some stage.
We couldn't broadcast that version.
So listen, just to hand back to you, but to say thank you to one and all. And I just think it's been a great morning, and really thank you for everybody for all of your support and for being here.
And thank you, Ruth, because that is it.